Namaste and welcome. You ever find yourself scrolling through the day's news and it just feels like a random jumble of stuff? You see a headline about some new law, then a story about a corporate bailout, then a sports update. It feels totally disconnected, right? But what if it's not? What if all those seemingly random dots from just one single day could be pieced together to reveal a much bigger, more coherent picture? Well, today, that is exactly what we're going to do. We've taken the key headlines from one 24-hour period in India, and in this explainer, we're going to treat them like pieces of a giant, fascinating puzzle.
So that's the big question we're asking today. When you lay all these pieces out on the table, what story does this one single day actually tell us? Is it a simple narrative of progress, a nation just rocketing forward? Or is it a story about deep, systemic problems that are holding it back? Or is it something way more complex, more contradictory, and honestly a lot more interesting? Let's dig in together and try to assemble this puzzle of modern India, one headline at a time.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the country's core programming, the laws and rules, getting a major overhaul. Then we'll follow the money, looking at some really high-stakes economic decisions. After that, we'll get our feet on the ground and witness the stark contrasts, where amazing progress and serious problems are literally next-door neighbors. Then we'll zoom out to see where India fits on the world stage. And finally, we'll bring it all back home, to the human stories behind the headlines.
Okay, let's jump right into our first section, rebooting India's systems. I want you to think of this like we're popping the hood on a car. We're not just checking the oil. We are looking at the engine, the wiring, the fundamental code that makes the entire country run. And we're not talking about minor tweaks here. We're talking about massive, fundamental rewrites to the rules that shape daily life for everyone.
We kick off with a huge shakeup in the digital world. A new bill has officially been signed into law, and it bans all online games that involve real money. Now, this is a massive deal. It forces a company like Dream 11, a fantasy sports giant worth billions, by the way, to completely reinvent itself. They're now scrambling to pivot to a free-to-play social game. And this really highlights a tough question that every society has to grapple with. On one side, you've got this booming industry, creating jobs, driving innovation, and bringing in a ton of tax money. But on the other side, you have these very real concerns about the social cost, things like gambling addiction and the financial ruin it can cause for some families. With this move, the government has made a very clear choice, deciding that the potential for harm here outweighs the economic benefits. A line has been drawn in the sand.
And next up, the government is rebooting something that affects literally every single person who earns a rupee, the Income Tax Act. The law that's being replaced goes all the way back to 1961. Just think about that for a second. The India of 1961 is a completely different planet compared to the digital, globalized India we live in today. So to stick with our car analogy, this is like taking a clunky, leaky 60-year-old Ambassador engine and swapping it out for a silent, super efficient, brand new electric motor. The goal? Fantastic. Simplicity, clarity, modernization. But the change itself is seismic. Every accountant, every business owner, every single person who files taxes now has to completely relearn the rules of the road. It's a massive, system-wide reboot that's going to take years to fully sink in.
So while the politicians are rewriting the big laws, the courts are busy fine-tuning the machinery of democracy itself. Over in Bihar, there was a situation where eligible voters were getting stuck, unable to get on the voting lists because of bureaucratic hurdles. So the Supreme Court stepped in with a really clear, practical order for the Election Commission: just cut the red tape. They ruled that people can use their Aadhaar card or one of 11 other common documents to prove who they are. Now, this might sound like a small procedural thing, but it's actually the system working exactly how it's supposed to. It's the highest court in the land making sure that the system has to bend for the people, not the other way around, and protecting the fundamental right to vote from getting lost in a pile of paperwork.
And you can see the same theme of practical adjustment, of moving from a rigid idea to something that actually works in the real world, playing out even on the streets. For years, the approach to India's stray dog population has been a huge debate, with one idea being to just build shelters for all of them. But the Supreme Court has now tweaked an earlier order, basically recognizing that sheltering millions of dogs is, well, it's often not practical or sustainable. The new approach is much more targeted. Sterilize the non-aggressive dogs and release them back, while organizing public feeding into specific zones. It's a small headline for sure, but it points to a much bigger, healthier trend in how things are being run. This shift away from these broad, one-size-fits-all ideas towards smarter, more pragmatic solutions for real-world problems.
All right, so those are the new rules of the game. Now let's do what they always say: follow the money. We're heading into the engine room of the country, the economy.
And what we find here is not some simple story of growth or decline. No, it's more like a high-stakes tightrope walk. It's a constant, delicate balancing act between boosting businesses, protecting consumers, and investing in the future, all at the same time.
2 trillion rupees. That is the absolutely staggering, almost impossible to imagine mountain of debt that the telecom giant Vodafone Idea is sitting on. Now, logically, you'd think a private company with that much debt would just be left to fail. But the Prime Minister's office is reportedly looking at a relief package. So why? Why on earth would the government think about bailing out a private company? Well, the reason is strategic. If Vodafone Idea collapses, India's massive telecom market shrinks to a duopoly, with just 2 big players left. And a duopoly almost always means less competition, which means higher prices and less innovation for you and me. So the government is on that tightrope. Do you let a massive company fail and face the market fallout, or do you step in to protect the structure of the market for the benefit of 1.4 billion people?
We're also seeing a very different kind of economic strategy at play with law enforcement. The Enforcement Directorate, or ED, is carrying out raids across 8 states, targeting an international drug cartel. But the really interesting part isn't just the raids, it's how they got there. This whole operation didn't start with some big dramatic bust. It started with a relatively small seizure of cocaine down in Goa. That one clue led them to uncover a whole network of ordinary people being used as money mules. And from there, they just followed the money trail. See, the ED gets it. You can seize drugs all you want, but money is the oxygen that keeps any criminal organization alive. So the ultimate goal of these raids isn't just to make arrests, it's to systematically take apart the cartel's entire financial system. You choke off the cash flow, and the whole rotten thing starts to collapse.
So while one part of the economy might be on life support, other parts are getting a massive shot of adrenaline. Over in Kolkata, 3 new stretches of the metro have just been opened. Now, a metro line is so much more than just a train that gets you from A to B. Economists have a term for it, an economic multiplier. Think about the ripple effect. A new line instantly makes property values go up all along its route. It connects business districts to residential areas, slashing commute times and making everyone more productive. It opens up brand new areas for shops and offices to open. This is a classic example of a smart public investment. It's not just about solving a traffic problem, it's about creating waves of economic growth that can lift up an entire city.
So, we've seen the big picture policies getting rebooted and the massive economic chess moves being made. But what does it all look like on the ground, for real people? Well, this is where the story gets really complicated. Because in a country as huge and as varied as India, gleaming modern development and shocking, heartbreaking decay often exist right next to each other, sometimes just a few kilometers apart.
86,934. That is the number of classrooms in Rajasthan's government schools that have been officially labeled as completely dilapidated. We're not just talking about a leaky roof here. We're talking about structures that are unsafe for children to be in. And this survey was only started after a school roof actually collapsed, tragically killing a student. This number, it's a punch to the gut. It exposes the harsh, uncomfortable reality at the heart of the modern India story. On the exact same day that the nation is celebrating a brand new, state-of-the-art metro line, it also has to face the fact that the roofs are literally falling in on its children's schools. It forces you to ask a really tough question about national priorities.
And from a story of man-made decay, we turn to the raw, terrifying power of nature. Up in the state of Uttarakhand, intense monsoon rains have triggered a massive landslide. It's so big that it has completely blocked the flow of the Yamuna River, one of the country's most sacred waterways. This has created a huge, unstable artificial lake that is now flooding buildings and forcing more than 100 people to evacuate their homes. The Himalayas are geologically young mountains, which makes them incredibly fragile and prone to stuff like this. It is a brutal, humbling reminder that for all of our grand plans and our development projects, millions of people live in places where nature is, and always will be, the boss.
And then, just when the picture seems completely bleak, crumbling schools, devastating landslides, you get a story like this one. For the first time in decades, a chital, a spotted deer, has been seen in the Aravalli Hills. For conservationists, this is like winning the lottery. A deer is what they call an indicator species. Its return suggests that the habitat is healing, that maybe, just maybe, the ecosystem is starting to recover. As one person beautifully put it, it's nature giving a thumbs up. It's this one tiny, beautiful flicker of hope that shows that even with all the struggles, regeneration is possible. It's the perfect example of this land of stark contrasts.
Okay, so we've looked inward at India's systems, its economy, and its struggles on the ground.
Now let's zoom the camera all the way out and see how the nation is playing its cards in an increasingly messy and complicated world. This part is all about navigating a global stage full of shifting friendships, old rivalries, and constant change.
This travel schedule for the Prime Minister tells you everything you need to know. On August 29th and 30th, he's set to be in Japan for a summit. Then, the very next day, August 31st, he travels to China for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. Now, Japan and China are, let's just say, major regional rivals with a very tense relationship. For India's leader to engage with both of them at the highest level, back-to-back like this, it's a perfect snapshot of India's foreign policy today. Back in the day, the term was non-alignment. Today, a much better term is multi-alignment. It's a very practical strategy of talking to everybody, maintaining independent relationships, and looking out for India's own interests without getting locked into any one camp.
And beyond the big summits, you can see these geopolitical ripples everywhere. In the world of sports, it's been confirmed. India will play Pakistan in the Asia Cup cricket tournament. But at the same time, the political ban on playing regular series in each other's countries, that's still very much in place. It shows you how sports and politics are just completely tangled up. Right in our neighborhood, Sri Lanka's former president has been arrested for misusing state funds, a move that walks that fine line between real accountability and political score settling. And then, thousands of miles away, a Ukrainian strike on a Russian oil pipeline has a direct impact on Europe, with countries like Hungary and Slovakia now worrying about their energy supply. It just goes to show how connected everything is, where one single event can send shockwaves across entire continents.
All right, for our final section, we're going to zoom the camera in as close as it can go. Because behind all the policies and the economic data and the diplomatic strategies, headlines are really about people. They are about individual triumphs, shared cultural losses, and the very real human costs of what happens in the world.
And let's start with the triumphs, which is always a good place to start. In an incredible display of skill and pure focus, Indian shooter Elavanil Valaravan has won the gold medal at the Asian Shooting Championships. That's a sport that demands just as much mental discipline as physical skill, so it's a fantastic individual achievement on the world stage. And at the exact same time, back home, the Khelo India Water Sports Festival is taking place on the beautiful Dal Lake in Srinagar. Now, hosting a major national sporting event like this in Kashmir, it's about more than just the races. It's a powerful symbol of normalcy and integration, and it's a huge source of inspiration for a whole new generation of young athletes from that region.
From the joy of victory, we have to turn to a moment of shared sadness and loss. The veteran Punjabi actor and comedian Jaswinder Bala has passed away at the age of 65. For anyone who grew up watching Punjabi movies over the last few decades, his face is just synonymous with laughter. From his famous Changata comedy tapes to blockbuster films, he was just always there, a constant beloved presence. His passing isn't just a sad news item, it really feels like the loss of a cultural icon, someone whose life's work was to bring joy to literally millions of people.
And finally, we have to acknowledge a truly devastating piece of international news from the day's headlines. A UN-backed panel of global food security experts has officially declared a state of famine in northern Gaza. Now, it's really important to understand that the word famine is a technical term. It is not used lightly. It means a very specific, catastrophic line has been crossed involving starvation, malnutrition, and death. The panel's assessment was brutally direct, calling the situation entirely man-made and a complete failure of humanity. As neutral explainers, we report this to you because it is a significant global event, a formal declaration of the most extreme level of human suffering.
So, there you have it. One nation, one day. We saw the country's operating system being rewritten. A 2 trillion rupee corporate drama, crumbling schools next to resilient nature, a delicate diplomatic dance, the pure joy of a gold medal, the shared sadness of losing a cultural hero, and the dark shadow of a global crisis. It's not one clean, simple story, is it? It's messy, it's contradictory, it's chaotic, and it's deeply, deeply human. So the final question isn't for me to answer. It's for you. After seeing all these pieces, what did you see? What connections jumped out at you?
Our whole goal here was to try and cut through the noise, connect a few dots, and hopefully empower you to see that bigger picture for yourself. If you found this useful, the best thing you can do is share it with someone who might also find it interesting. We do this to try and create a clearer understanding for everyone. And please, follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this podcast every morning at 8 a.m. Thank you so much for your time.